In honor of Black History Month, the African American community came together to discuss the novel The Hate You Give and the impact that it's played within their community.
The goal of this discussion is to bring the community full circle to talk about things that are heavily impacting our communities, but not just to talk about them and complain about them, but to bring solutions to the forefront so that we can work together to make our community a safe place for everybody.
The Hate You Give panel discussion held at the Wilmington Public Library brought a unique set of individuals together to serve as the event's speakers.
I knew it was important to choose these individuals because it depicted the community. So we have someone from the faith-based community, someone from an organization created to advocate for girls and women on a basis every single day. We also have law enforcement. We have younger people who are also advocating for their communities as well. So it was very strategic because we wanted to have somebody in each point of the community voicing their opinions and sharing with the community how we can all create solutions to provide help to again make our community safe.
The novel, The Hate You Give, focuses on Star, an African-American teenager whose unarmed Black friend is shot by a white police officer, sparking outrage and protest. Many readers believe the novel brings light to police brutality and echoes all too many real-life tragedies.
It brings light to racism, and it brings light to people being unarmed and being harmed for reasons that are slim to none. So this is important during Black history because as African American peoples, a lot of our time in America has been through strife and has faced racism. And it's important for us to bring that to light, but also not forget to acknowledge those things that are happening to us every day that have also been happening to us in the past, right? So our goal is to come together and to fight against that adversity, fight against and overcome those things that harm us and those things that hurt us.
Some attendees shared their views and outrage on the frictions between African Americans and the police.
The conversations were actually really interesting, as the beginning of the novel focuses on when the young unarmed Black man gets shot. So it's almost like we had some debates on I guess whether or not it was the young man's fault or not. So we had some interesting discussions on race, on privilege, on police brutality, and it got kind of heated at moments, but I think it's necessary because where else do they have an opportunity to have these type of conversations about race relations in the community?
Although the conversation around police brutality and race can be difficult, the event gave attendees the opportunity, openness, and freedom to be themselves and to ask the hard questions. Just like in the novel The Hate You Give, the topic of code switching, the process of shifting from one language or dialect to another, depending on the surroundings or conversational setting, also became a part of the discussion.
When I did code switch, because when I was young, I went to Catholic school. It wasn't like a Catholic school you had to pay with. So that's why I found commonality with Star. I went to Catholic school, but it wasn't a Catholic school with white people. You actually had to be of a low-income background. You had to go through something tragic to go to the school I went to when I was younger. So in middle school and in high school, I went to Catholic school. And so when you go to Catholic school, or private school, somebody paid for you to be there. So you got sponsors, you got people that are rich, or people that work for foundations that are paid for your spot to be there, for your tuition. And so for me, when I was younger in middle school and high school, when I was told to code switch, it was an insecurity that I had with it. So I code switched. I code switched before I was comfortable in who I truly was. And that's the issue you run. So I think code switching might be necessary, but know that you code switching. Don't think that you are inferior, that your aunts, your uncles, your cousins, your mother, whoever, no matter how they talk, that they're inferior. I think that's important to keep that in place, but the only way you can keep that in place is if you have a strong base in self. And the schools that I went to wasn't really concerned with giving me a strong base in who I am and who my people are. And so for me, when I code switched, it was code switching out of insecurity. I was ashamed of mine. I was ashamed of my brother. They weren't there to see me sell out, but I was ashamed of them in the way they talked and them being uneducated. And they didn't graduate from the schools of these white people that I'm talking to. So for me, I did it out of insecurity. But I think it is a way to do it if you're grounded in yourself. I'm saying I don't do it. for the most part. I'm not saying I wouldn't do it. If I was talking to an individual that could give my organization a grant or something, I would talk in a way, but I know that I'm doing that for a certain purpose. But if you're not strongly grounded in yourself and know what's driving you, and you're moving, going with the flow, I wouldn't recommend you to code switch. And I know it might be panelists that disagree with me, but I wouldn't recommend you to code switch unless you are strong and confident about who you are. Because when we talk about people leaving the hood and never coming back, and why they don't give back, it's because they didn't have a strong base in themselves. And so once they got the money or they graduated from college, they got the job, they're not thinking about the hood because their whole life they've been conditioned to hate the hood and hate all the hood produces. So if you're gonna code switch for your job or for individuals so that you can have a common understanding with people, so y'all can speak a common language, that's dope, that's cool. But know who we are and be proud of us. Don't be in spaces talking a different way, or bring your cousin to this event and be embarrassed that your cousin talking slang. And you feel it, because you can feel that inside yourself. You be like, dang, like this that nigga stuff. It's like, don't do that. That's what I'm saying. Excuse my language. But don't do that, because that's a real thing, and I felt it inside when I was growing up. And there was nobody to talk to about that. It was an emphasis on code switching to be successful, but it was nobody to talk to me about the insecurity I felt by doing it.
To improve relationships with communities of color, Sergeant Coleman suggested that an officer in the community develop a bond before a violation or altercation has occurred.
A lot of times people have negative images that are displayed to them through media, through stories, and not always experienced by themselves. So sometimes we have to be the ones to actually get out there and just strive to have encounters that may not be warranted from a car stop, but just like in this situation, at a community center, speaking and getting to know one another before we have an altercation, before we have a conflict. So as Wilmington Police, the main problem that we have is a lot of times only want to call us when they need us. But then when you need us, there's an issue already going on. We don't come in on a fair playing field. So with situations like this, we can actually have conversations where there is no conflict already, have an opportunity to actually have everybody at ground zero and talk about things.
The novel The Hate U Give was also created into a movie last year, October, and since its release, it's brought much needed attention to the fear that African Americans face when being approached by a police officer. Reporting in Wilmington, Delaware, Yesenia Taveras, WITN 22.